earlier. And now, if Shannon's ready, I will welcome her to the podium. And I've got her slides all queued up here already, so if you please help me welcome her.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get my notes out of my dress pockets. The big deal for women, having pockets. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited. I'm excited to get started, and I think in doing so, what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of take you guys back a little bit. And we're just kind of going to regress, and I want you to think about when you were a kid. I want you to think about the stuff that you like to do and the stuff that scared you. And to help you do that, I would like for you to come up, this little table here. I set this up for you. And I want you to, there's crayons. Do not bring pens or pencils. You have to write in crayon or scented marker. Feel free to sniff them. I want you to touch Play-Doh. I want you to play with it and touch it and smell it. There's candy. If you want, take your favorite, especially if you had a favorite when you were a kid. I want you to kind of immerse yourself into the experience and memories of being a kid. So go ahead and help yourselves. There's cards up there. And you'll see that there's a card up there. And I want you guys to write on the cards. On one side, I want you to write 3 good memories from being a kid. 3 good memories from being a kid. And on the back, I want you to draw a picture of something that scared you as a kid. And there's an example card right there. And if anybody loves the Play-Doh or any of the stuff, feel free to take it back to your seat, touch it and feel it while I'm talking, suck on the candy, go ahead and get into the experience of being a kid. So 3 good memories from being a kid, 3 things that you really liked, 3 memories, and then I want you to draw a picture of something that scared you on the back of the card. So you have 1 good side and 1 bad side, and there's an example card right there. You can see my little drawing of the devil, because I was so afraid of the devil when I was a child.
I will share mine in the meantime for everyone's amusement. I believe that Count Chocula lived in my attic, and I was afraid to walk past the attic door in the dark that night.
That's a reasonable fear, I think, for a child. And the chocolate's just there to lure you in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, uh-huh. If you don't have fears, I hear somebody say you don't have fears. Anything that made you anxious, anything that made you nervous. And take the cards with you. Take the cards with you, please. And for anybody, if the activity is just too real, feel free to escape. Have some serious baggage, totally fine. Just sit that one out, no problem. Maybe if crayons bring back, But I feel like it's a whole sensory thing. The smell of the crayons, the smell of the Play-Doh, the paper, all that stuff that kids touch all the time. As adults, we don't really use crayons. We don't really use scented markers as much. And as I'm talking, if you guys want to come get Play-Doh or come get more candy, I want you to feel free. I want you to stay in a kid headspace. as much as possible as we go through this. I knew I was going to I tried to have something for everybody. Just hold on to your cards. Hold on to your cards and hold them. They're your good things and your bad things from being a kid. I had lots of fears as a child. But the devil was a big one. And will feature prominently in my talk. Does anybody want to share any of their fears or any of their good memories while we're waiting? Pogo stick?
We used to play at an overpass on a little street, and two guys would get on one side, and two guys would get on the other side, and you'd go up, the street was muddy the other side.
That sounds awesome.
You know, you had to go down to get the rock. You had to go down to get the rock in order to throw the rock back in to get somebody else muddy, so.
So you had to take a risk.
Right.
Over the overpass
The overpass was Route 30 in Lancaster.
that cars were driving on.
Yeah.
I actually remember doing something like that. So everybody's got their memories and their fears and kind of remembering being a kid, remembering getting excited easily, getting scared easily, having big emotions. So we're going to talk about some of the things that kids do. And some of the behavior that's a little mysterious, a little inconvenient. We know that children can behave erratically. They can act out for any number of reasons. On the way up here, my 2-year-old was whining. He knows how to talk and ask for things, but he just preferred to whine, which is one of the most annoying sounds that you can hear in a car. They struggle with their emotions. They have very big emotions. They don't know how to talk about their emotions. They disregard your boundaries. They have no appreciation for personal space. They get right up in your face, and they want to tell you something right away. Or they absolutely do not want to be touched at all, no matter what you're trying to do to them, even if it's for their own good. Like putting on their clothes, changing their diaper. So I want you to definitely remember, again, being a child. And I want you to remember acting irrationally. I know it's kind of hard because everybody likes to think that they're logical and they do everything for a reason. But I want you to think about the things that you did as a kid that seemed irrational to adults. You had a very, very good reason for doing what you did, but the adults around you didn't understand it. And they may have misunderstood you. And I also want to not neglect the teenage years. So I say think about being a kid. Teenagers are also kids. So you can think about what you did as a teen, and maybe you can think of more things. Being a teen, doing things that are irrational, doing things that are emotional. Do you remember being rebellious? That's a hard one for a lot of parents to handle, the rebellion. The being purposely deceitful, the lying, being angry. It's not so hard to comfort a child who's upset, crying, or afraid because you feel good about giving them that comfort. But if they're being rebellious, if they're not doing what you say, or they're trying to tell you something about yourself you're not trying to hear in the moment, whether it's true or not, it can be a little bit more difficult to deal with that. But I want you to remember being a kid and doing that stuff. I remember when I was a kid, and my mom told me that I couldn't have any more soda. I had one in my hand. And I was in the middle of popping the pop top. It was like halfway up, you know? And I was in the middle of opening it, and my mom said, "Shannon, you can't have any more soda. You can't drink any more soda." And right after she said that, I moved my finger just a little bit more. And in my head, I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking I want to drink the soda. But that made her really mad. Just a small little thing, little rebellious thing that I did. And we're going to talk about believing in strange things, like Count Chocula in the attic. So as adults, we're like, that is not real. Of course, that's not a thing to be afraid of. But kids can be really, truly afraid of things that are not real. They can be afraid of things that they can't see, or they think they're there. They think they hear things, they think they smell something. Who can remember being afraid of something as a child that you now know is totally not real? I absolutely remember. Now, as an adult, you're like, that was ridiculous. Why was I so afraid of that? It's because you're a kid. And do you remember, did anybody tell adults what they were afraid of? And the adults were like, that's silly, go back to bed, that's ridiculous, leave me alone, trying to shut you off. I definitely remember that. One of my fears was, I don't know why my dad let me watch The Exorcist when I was 8. But he did. And he treated it almost like a documentary experience, which was even more terrifying, because The Exorcist is a movie, and it is fiction. But I was 8, and my dad was telling me like it was real. And has everybody here seen The Exorcist, or at least kind of know what it's about? A demon possesses this little girl, and all these terrible things happen. Her head spins around, and just very frightening for an 8-year-old. And I could not get these visuals out of my mind. And I remember going to my dad one night, and my mom was very hands-off about this. She's like, no, you wanted to watch the movie, you got to deal with this. As in, Dad had to deal with me, not her. And I went to Dad, and I was like, Dad, I'm so afraid. What if the demons come and get me? Because you can't see a demon, and you can't really feel them, and I guess sometimes they say you can smell them or whatever, but I didn't know. So I talked to Dad, and Dad said, well, I wasn't baptized, so like double jeopardy, double danger for me. I wasn't baptized yet, but he said, but I was baptized, and as long as you're here in my house, then you're under my protection. But then I started asking him other questions. Like, wasn't this kid under this protection? And he was like, well, she used a Ouija board to talk to this person that opened her up for this. Okay, well, stay away from Ouija boards then. And then the demons won't get you. Okay. I was still afraid, but that was mildly comforting, I guess. Now, revisiting the rebellion thing, I went to sleepovers. And back in the 90s, 80s, when there were sleepovers, sometimes there were Ouija boards. And I'm a very curious person. And so, of course, I decided to play with one with a bunch of other little girls. And of course, that experience traumatized me even more after the fact. It's like when you want to watch a scary movie and you're watching it and you're fine, but then when you go to bed, you're like, why did I do that? That was like me with the Ouija board. During the time, it was kind of entertaining, but afterwards, I was like, why did I do that? I opened myself up to demonic possession, and I'm going to be possessed now because, of course, that's going to happen to me. So now, in our kid mindset, but still remembering about adults, we're going to talk about some of the crazy stuff. I hate to use the word crazy, but it's very unreasonable things that adults believe. 37% of people believe in ghosts. 26% say they've seen a ghost. They've seen one. 52, half of people, believe a house can be haunted. They believe this. They think this is real. And even more people believe in demonic possession. The Catholic Church believes in demonic possession. They take your money to teach you how to exorcise people, apparently. And lots of other people believe in demonic possession. So that's a very common thing. Lots of people believe in it. And demonic possession can look like all different kinds of things. It can look like somebody having a seizure, which has a medical reason. It can look like a kid being a kid being defiant. Oh, they have a demon in them. So how do we get the demons out of the children? So I'm going to tell you a story about how my demonic possession went. Now, please remember, this is all very real for me. And I very much believed that I had some kind of demon, some kind of horrible presence following me around. And I had some very good reasons why I thought that way. I wasn't completely uncritical in my thinking when I was a kid. I questions. So I saw The Exorcist, and I played with the Ouija board. Dad said that I would be under his protection. But it seemed like I was not under his protection, because things started happening in my room when I was alone. And it was late at night, and I was too afraid to wake up my parents. I was too afraid to say anything, because I thought if I did say something, that the demon would become even more aggressive, because that's what happened in The Exorcist as well. And so one night, and I think maybe I was 9 or 10, sitting on my bed, reading a book, doing homework, and I hear a sound. Now, it's very quiet, and this is a time of there not being like cell phones and lots of digital noise. So it was definitely quiet. I hear the sound of a bell ringing. And it's in my room, and I'm trying to determine where the sound is coming from. And this is very scary for me because, again, I believe in demons. And I'm looking around, and I hear the sound, and it's coming from up above me. And I have a desk, and I have a hutch. And on top of my hutch, I have 4 beautiful porcelain dolls. And they're all representing different seasons. And the Christmas one has a little bell. She holds in her hand, just like this. And that's the bell that's ringing. And so I sit very quietly on my bed, and I sit very still, because I'm trying to figure out what's doing this. Because I don't want to believe a demon is doing it. And so I'm sitting very still on my bed, and it's just ringing and ringing and ringing. And I'm not moving at all, and nothing could be making it move. And then it stops. And then I pray, and I'm sure I did something bad to make the demon do that. I'm sure I did something. And so I'm praying to God, please, please, please protect me from whatever this is, hopefully not a demon. I don't want it to be a demon. Please, just protect me. And a week later, the same thing happened. Just ringing. Ding, 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 ding. While I'm sitting there, it's so quiet. All I can hear is the bell ringing. And then one night, I'm asleep, totally asleep in my bed, jolted awake, and my bed is shaking. My bed is shaking, which is something that so many supernatural horror movies use, is the shaking bed. And this is like my just worst nightmare. And my bed is shaking, and the bell is ringing, and I'm thinking, this is it. I don't know what's going to happen here, but this is it. This is all real. What I'm telling you right now, this actually happened. So my bed is shaking, and I'm just waiting for it to stop, and I'm thinking maybe it was an earthquake. Maybe it was an earthquake. The next day, I'm looking for news, I'm listening, is there an earthquake? Nothing. I think I may have even asked some people at school if there's maybe something. Nothing. Nothing. There is no reason for this, and I was so terrified to tell anyone because I was afraid of some kind of retribution. This went on for years. The bell ringing, my furniture shaking. I was terrified, and I prayed all the time, and it just kept happening. And sometimes it would taper off and go away, and sometimes it would come back. And there didn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to any of it, but it never stopped terrifying me. I was able to move in with a boyfriend when I was 18, and I felt like, maybe the demon was attached to like my bedroom or something. But I was glad to be away. I finally got away, but I never understood why this was happening to me. I never shook that fear because all of those events happened and kept happening, and I didn't have any reasonable explanation for any of it. And so, additionally, whenever anything else would happen that might have a reasonable explanation, a light flickering and burning out, anything like that. Lights flicker and burn out all the time. Well, I would just combine this with the other thing and think this is the demon manifesting and just trying to drive me bonkers. So I moved back in with my parents when I was in my early 20s. And I was still a believer then, and I was a little bit nervous about this. And I was bringing my then 3-year-old son with me, and I was really worried because the room that he was supposed to be staying in was my old bedroom. And I was afraid for him. And so I decided to just bite the bullet, and I talked to my mom. And I said, Mom, this stuff happened throughout my whole childhood, and I was terrified. And do you see anything weird happening? Is there anything weird happening around the house? Is there any reason that this could possibly be happening? Because I just don't want my child to be terrified like I was terrified. And she was quiet for a while. And then she started laughing. And I just felt so heartbroken because I thought she thinks like I'm bullshitting, or she doesn't believe me, or she thinks that I'm, irrational, crazy. And I asked her why she was laughing. And she said, all of those times that you heard that bell ringing and that things were shaking, that was me and your dad having sex. And I was like, how can... She said, there's like a common floorboard, and we would, and you... Now, of course, they would have never said this when I was a kid because we didn't talk about sex at all. It didn't happen. And my brother and I just sprung up from a cabbage leaf or something, apparently. But this whole time, I was terrified. So my parents getting it on. And so you can tell from my story that children are very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable because they will believe what they're told and what they're exposed to. Now, I have general anxiety disorder. I've had it ever since I can remember. And I had it as a kid. And when you have an anxiety disorder, and your dad tells you that demons are real, and your dolls shake, then you're gonna believe this stuff, and you're gonna think the worst things. And I probably should have been seeing a therapist and been on medication, but instead I was praying, and that did not work. So as I told my story, I don't know if anybody kind of remembered feeling fear as a child, feeling that kind of fear, feeling out of control, feeling like you couldn't say anything to anybody because adults don't believe kids. So how do we exorcise the demons? We realize demons don't exist. We don't tell children that demons exist, not even to get them to behave. And we work towards a reasonable diagnosis or solution. So, okay. Demons are not real. We know that. But some people think some kids are just bad. Some kids are just bad kids. And I'm sure you guys have gone to school, and there was always the bad kid. He was always the one getting in trouble. He was getting sent to the principal's office. He was starting fights. So, does anybody believe that there are bad kids? If you don't want to admit it, it's fine. I'm going to prove you wrong. You believe there might be some bad kids. Okay. Well, but we don't know what he was like as a kid, you know. So, a lot of people are prone to believing that some kids are bad. And bad meaning what? They're irredeemable. They just act the way that they do because they want to make everyone's lives miserable. I mean, sometimes they do want to make your life miserable. But there's an underlying reason. Now, most kids behave in ways that are inconvenient for us. And that's what we say is bad, when they behave inconveniently. They're being loud. They're being annoying. They're being rebellious. They are going into your refrigerator and reaching in and taking the eggs out, smashing them on the floor just to see what's inside. That's what my child did. One of the things he did. Yeah, as soon as I would go to the bathroom. If I had to go to the bathroom, I'd go to the bathroom, and I'd hear the refrigerator door open. He'd be getting the eggs, because he loved eggs, and he loved seeing what was inside of them. It was the same thing every time, but he just couldn't get enough. So kids act the way that they act for a reason. And if you all remembered what it was like to be a kid, I'm sure that you can kind of recall what some of your own reasons might have been. And it might even be difficult right now for you to conceptualize those reasons because they're kid reasons. They're not adult reasons. They don't even make sense to you right now. Like when I opened up the Pop-Top can of soda. I lost the privilege of drinking soda for a week. That was really stupid. Don't know why I did it. But my kid brain thought it was a good idea. So usually when kids are being bad, they're tired, they're hungry, they're bored. Boredom is a big one. A lot of people don't realize that boredom is a really big one in driving undesirable behavior. They might need attention. They might be sad. They might be angry. They might be upset for some reason, and they're acting out. So usually kids act bad as a way to get our attention because they need our help fixing their problem. That is sometimes harder than just telling them to be quiet and setting them off somewhere. But that's what they need from us when they're being bad. Now I'm talking about the vast percentage of kids. There are definitely some kids where we need help solving problems. Because some kids are not, there's all kinds of differences in how people process information. But the vast majority of kids, they just need some basic care. So the cure for bad kids. It's humanism. So also I want to remind you, kids have limited coping mechanisms. Adults can do all kinds of stuff. We can act out and we can be total jerks. And we can drink and smoke and do all kinds of illegal drugs. We can. We shouldn't, but we can. We can go out. We have freedom. We can go and do things, blow off steam. And kids are restricted to what they're allowed to do or what they're able to do within whatever confined environment that they're in. so one way we can help kids is to limit their exposure to harmful adult delusions. Now, I don't think that all religion is inherently bad. I've met plenty of progressive Jews, Christians that don't adhere to most of the Bible, and they are essentially humanists. But a lot of religious dogma is inherently bad. There's medical quackery, all kinds of reasons to give kids to fear doctors, to fear medicine, to fear things that would help them. And then there's food and chemical fear mongering. Oh, don't eat that, it has chemicals in it. What does that mean? There's chemicals in everything. You know? Eat an apple, it has chemicals in it. Don't eat that food is evil. No, it's not, it's food. They just can't eat it all the time. So we need to teach children about these things. And the bigger and older they get, the more we have to teach them that these things exist and how to ask questions and how to be critical thinkers. And I'm going to tell you something about a critical thinker child. They can be really difficult to deal with because you're teaching them to ask questions, and they're going to ask you questions, a lot of them. And sometimes those questions are going to suck. And sometimes as parents we make mistakes, and we make rules. Sometimes the rules don't make sense. Why do we make this rule? I don't know. Because I'm trying to make my life easier. Mom, why do I need to go to bed at 9 o'clock? My show's not over until 9:15. Can I please watch my show until 9:15? I mean, if it were an adult, I'd be like, yeah, of course. I mean, it's 15 minutes. It's fine. You don't have school the next day, whatever. But as adults, we're like, no, rules. Follow them. If you can't explain something to a child in a way that makes sense, they're not going to respect or obey you. So you cannot be dogmatic with your children or with other people's children. You can't just tell them to follow rules for no reason. There has to be a reason, and they have to get it. So this is another thing that kids, it's getting better. But kids learn these things not so much by the lessons that we teach them overtly, but by watching us. And so they will listen and overhear jokes, racist jokes, misogynist jokes. They will overhear things that you say about people. They will watch your body language. Kids are like little sponges, and they see and hear everything that you do. They watch the way that you stand, the way that you act. They see how close you stand to people, how far away you stand to people. They see how you treat certain people, and that's what they model. So we can't teach our kids by telling them to not be racist and by telling them to just love everyone and respect everyone. We have to do it ourselves and show them how. And when we make a mistake, we need to be honest about it and tell them that. Now, this and these lessons are not just for people with children. Or I should say, not just for people who have legal custody over children. Because we all have children. Because the kids are going to be the ones voting. And they're going to be the ones taking care of this planet. And they're going to be the ones doing what we're doing now. So it's really everyone's job to contribute to upbringing of children. Even if you only interact with them infrequently. I mean, how many people can remember something a stranger said or did that affect you for good or bad? I mean, I can remember strangers saying things that were mean or saying things that were kind and inspiring, and it affected me and it stayed with me. So everybody has the ability to affect how children think. Even if you yourself don't have them, you have the ability to model good behavior because they watch all of us. And they're going to be asking questions. Why did that person do this? And why did that person do this? And why are they dressed this way? They're going to be asking questions and watching. And it's important for all of us to model humanist behavior. So another aspect of the bad child falsehood is not understanding how children work. So I have three. I have a 15-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, and I have a 2-year-old. You would not believe how similar it is raising a 15-year-old and a 2-year-old. So children, and remember please, that teens are children. They may be bigger and taller than you, but they are children. In fact, we are not really fully developed until we're about 25. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later. So even 18-year-olds aren't really adults. They still need help. They won't want it, but they need it, and they need good mentors, good role models. Children are, obviously the physically undeveloped is easy, we can see them, they're little. Yes, they're physically underdeveloped, or undeveloped. They're also mentally undeveloped, and this is kind of what people forget. And this is what I sometimes forget and have to remind myself of all the time when I'm dealing with my own kids. Why is my child climbing up the counter? Because he has poor impulse control. Because that part of his brain is not developed yet. He's really not making a conscious decision. He doesn't have the ability to control himself. It's just not there. It will develop and grow, and I can work on him with that, but he's not just trying to tell me, you know, pound sand, Mom, I'm going to go do this. He just has poor impulse control. He can't help it. He's a kid. The same thing with testing boundaries. The rebelliousness of kids can be infuriating, but getting into a battle of control with a kid is not a good idea, and everyone always loses. If you get into a battle of wills with a child, you will both lose. Because what they're trying to do is they're testing boundaries. It's developmentally appropriate. There's something that me and my other mom friends, we talk about our kids, we talk about the things they do. You know, this is crappy behavior, but it's age-appropriate behavior. Teenagers act the way that they do because they're preparing to be adults. They're asking questions. They're starting to question authority. They're also breaking down the pillar upon which they put their parents. So if you think about a teen, they're growing up, they're going to be an adult soon. That's kind of a very anxiety-inducing time for a lot of kids. And they've put their parents up on these pedestals. You know, you as the parent have been like this perfect person, this super person. You're like a god, essentially. And then when they get to be a teen, they're like, well, I can't be that. I can't do that. I cannot be that. So I'm going to tear my parent down and bring them down to my level so that I can maybe, hopefully, attain reasonable adulthood. Now, it's really sucky as the parent, but it's age appropriate and it passes, just like all of these other developmental phases. They test boundaries, they have poor impulse control, like I said, toddlers and teens. Remember toddlers and teens, because people give toddlers the benefit of a doubt because they're small and cute, but they don't do the same thing for teens. They're very similar in how they are developmentally. They are developing rapidly emotionally. Teens are developing rapidly hormonally. They're doing the testing of the boundaries. They're trying to figure out what being an adult is. So I think part of what we need to do, and part of, I guess, what I would like to make part of more humanist awareness is giving more teens space to grow and to be mentored and let them make mistakes and not take their behavior personally, because that's what they're doing. They're growing. And so now we get to the caregivers part. And this is very near and dear to my heart because I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so maybe this seems a little bit selfish. But caregivers also need support, and a lot of caregivers don't receive it. And a lot of the reason why children struggle is because their caregivers are not supported, and they cannot give the proper nurturing that these children need. Parents are tired. Parents are losing their patience. I mean, I can think of so many times I've lost my patience, and I just have to take a big breath. And I have a pretty good life, and things are usually pretty okay for me. But parents who are working several jobs, who don't have enough time to sleep, who have their own issues, they are not getting the support they need. And that is also a part of kind of what drives things with kids, what can go wrong. You know, people say, oh, well, look at the parents. Well, let's look at the parents. Are they getting what they need? Are their needs being met? Because if the parents' needs are not being met or the caregiver's needs are not being met, then the children's needs will not be met. Because you cannot pour from an empty vessel. So in modeling humanism to children, I'm talking about acting like a humanist and apologizing when you don't, and knowing that they're watching you all the time, and also giving them space and giving them patience, and the same for their caregivers. I cannot tell you how much it hurts on the inside when you're a mom and your kids are just losing it and people are giving you that look. She can't control her kids. It sucks. I've gone home crying before from outings because my kids were acting up and people were just like looking at me, and I don't expect people to help me. I don't expect people to take care of my kids for me. I just want a little space to be a mom. And I want people to look at me like I'm a human being and to appreciate that caregiving is a difficult job. So what I really want everyone here to take away from this talk, I want you to remember in the beginning, when I asked you guys to kind of dig into your childhood, remember that. That will help you. Remember being a kid. It will help you have empathy for kids and for their caregivers. You'll remember what it was like. You'll remember what it was like to have somebody smile at you. You'll remember what it was like to have somebody treat you like you were special. Don't judge caregivers. This can be difficult because caregivers make mistakes. And in any given situation in public, you may see a caregiver make a mistake. We don't have to condemn the caregiver right in that moment. I mean, unless the child is in mortal peril. You can smile, you can be helpful, you can offer information or help, but if you're going to intervene, do it with kindness. If you're not going to intervene, then don't intervene and give them the space to make their mistakes and learn and grow. And I want you to remember, children are not bad. Children are not bad. They are tired. They are bored. They are people with undeveloped brains. I mean, everybody in here is sitting very nicely, but you guys can all sit here for a while. If you were a group of kids, you'd be jumping up and down, and that would be normal. That would be age-appropriate behavior, and for me to ask you to do something different would be kind of cruel. It would be like me asking you guys to sit here and listen to me talk for 3 hours. Nobody wants that. You'd be like, no way, lady. It's kind of the same thing. You have to put it in perspective. They've got little brains, little bodies, and they can be difficult to take care of. And if anybody has any questions or stories, I won't judge you. I'm not a perfect parent either. I totally have lost my patience with my kids. I have totally done the I'm not making dinner, have fun eating chips. I've totally done that.
For the benefit of the video, excuse me, sorry that was so loud, I'm going to run the mic, so be sure to tip it back towards you, because otherwise the people watching on YouTube won't get your question.
Yeah, I agree. No child, when they start, is bad. However, if they've been brought up wrong for a long period of time, having taught senior high school for many years, there certainly is a point where certain people develop strong egos that are not controlled by morals. And although maybe with proper psychological help, they could be brought around, but tends to me that you can't treat them as if they're like a regular kid. You've got to understand that they're out to con you. And you have to treat them as if they are bad, but not bad in the sense that they're necessarily their fault. But you can't be misled by thinking that you're going to get away with treating them like a regular kid either.
That is partially true. I think instead of thinking of them as bad, children whose needs are not being met. Children whose needs are not being met are definitely going to behave in ways that you don't want them to. And as with teachers, and I have so much respect for teachers because they're given a mixed bag and they have very limited control because they're not parents, they're just teachers. And they're there for just a tiny little snapshot. But what I've found is there's a lot of power in non-engagement. Like again, my relationship with my teenager transformed when I stopped getting into power struggles with him. I stopped trying to control him. I mean, there were rules, and I had very good explanations for the rules. We agreed mutually on the rules. And if he broke the rule, he knew what the punishment was going to be. When he would behave in a way that was hurtful, instead of getting angry, I got vulnerable. And I would say, that really hurt me. And it totally changed everything. Now, I'm the mom, so that's going to be different because I'm dealing with my child. But I think a lot of people feel like they have to control kids, and you cannot control kids. I cannot stress that enough. You cannot control them. You can give them very good reasons to do what you want them to do. But at the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do. And if you have not made your case, then they're going to do what they want. And I have failed to make my case many, many times. But there are times when you can just choose not to engage with ego, especially.
In a classroom, you don't really have that choice. You've got 29 other kids out of 30 or 32 kids that may be in your class, or even if there's only 15 in your class and one person is doing that. So yeah, you can choose to not engage, but you really don't have that choice.
Well, no, but I mean, there would just be enforcement of the rules.
Yeah.
If the rule is broken, then the thing happens.
Yeah. I get it.
Right, but it's not, I guess, when that happens with my kids and with other kids too, I'm very clear, these are the boundaries, and if you break them, this happens. It's not a personal thing. I don't even get mad.
No, I agree. That's basically what I do.
Yeah, it's just
okay.
like, dude, it's not personal, but, the rule is here for this reason, and you broke it, so now you got to pay the piper.
Sorry.
No, thank you, because the teachers...
I said one other thing, that sometimes you just freak out and you get really mad at them. Do you think it's bad for a kid to experience some of that craziness and anger, because they're going to face it all their lives, and maybe dealing with mom and learning how to deal with crazy mom once in a while might be a useful thing.
I think it's not necessarily bad on its own as long as it's followed up. Like, it's not, like I said, being vulnerable in front of your children is okay, but there needs to be follow-up. So like when I've lost it, it's harder with the little ones because they only understand so much. But I've lost it with my teen before, and then I followed up, and I say, I'm sorry I yelled. I was really upset about this. And I explain my emotions, and then he gets it. And usually the behavior improves because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings. For whatever reason, he did the thing. So no, it's not, as parents, you're going to make mistakes, and you cannot judge yourself as a bad parent every single time you make a mistake because you will never get out from that cloud. So you just have to keep moving forward. And if you make a mistake, you just address the mistake because that's what you would want your kids to do. They make a mistake, you would want them to be like, I made this mistake, I'm sorry, this is what was going on. You would want them to talk to you. So it's like, is freaking out bad? Essentially, yes. I would prefer to not do that. But is it the worst thing that could happen? No, as long as it happens within the context of the follow-up.
I saw Paula's hand first, and then I'll come back to Alicia. Yeah, I agree very much with what you said about teenagers being so similar to toddlers in their emotional development, and that we do underestimate that. As the teacher of 125-year-old high school students in a district that sees a high level of poverty, many students being raised by single parents, or many children that, I have about 10 students that are homeless right now. And I have one student that many other teachers were extremely critical of, said, you know, she doesn't care about school, she hasn't been showing up for class, and gave her a really hard time. I sent her an email and I said, I hope everything's okay, how are you doing? And she showed up to school after school the next day, didn't actually come to school, but she came afterwards. And she said, thank you so much for sending me that email. And I found out that her father had committed suicide a month ago, and that's why she stopped coming to school. I had another student who frequently got in fights, frequently would skip class, frequently would confront teachers, and I found out that he was homeless and that a lot was going on with him. So, you know, a lot of what I found out is that if you have those one-on-one conversations, it can make a huge difference to them. And even the most stubborn of the students, or the ones that, because I certainly have ones that talk back to me or curse at me or any of that, but even those ones, if you get that chance to still show them you care and to say something and to have that conversation with them, some of them, it still won't make a difference, but some of them, they really do pull through then. So I've had students that have turned around in the course of the school year because of that. So it does make a difference.
Yeah, it's an example of being vulnerable with kids, because you're expressing concern, you're expressing care. And they could come back and just be like, F you, I don't care, you know, and they may. But even if they do, sometimes it still does make a difference. And I think with kids, it's a change of, instead of trying to control them and power over them, you need to be vulnerable and receptive as much as you can. I know with teachers, it has to be immensely difficult. But doing that, I think, makes such a huge difference. I think you're right.
Come back to Alicia.
I just had what I thought would be a really good example for what she was talking about with the follow-up. I have a high energy kid, and he tends to get bored. And one of the things that he found out that he likes to do is pick on people until they explode.
That is Nova. Nova does that.
He's very good at it as well. And he ended up getting into a fight on the bus, and things were said and body parts were thrown. And I had a conversation. I was mad, and I was like yelling at him, like, "What are you doing? What are you thinking? Like, get in a fight on the bus. You're a first grader." And he was like, "Mommy, I was bored." And so I explained to him, like, we did the follow-up. He got his consequence. He got the follow-up. What I told him was, like, you know, you have to understand that if you're going to do that, that you run the risk of that happening, and you have to expect that if you're going to pick on people, they could explode on you. That's a reasonable response. And if you get into a fight on the bus, you know that's an expectation of you not to do that. So you have to expect that you're going to get the adults in your life to be angry about that. And so when it happened again, it didn't happen on the bus again, but he caught himself doing it to his brother, and he was like, he recognized, like, oh, you know, he's getting angry, and this is an appropriate response to what I'm doing. I should stop. And so, like, I think it is important to get them to be able to see us act like human beings, because then when they get older, they have a realistic expectation of how their actions and their behaviors towards other people are gonna have the consequences of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is definitely okay to get angry, for sure. You know, we just, as parents, we definitely have to be careful how we express that. But yeah, being human in front of your kids is really important.
Would you comment on the role of religion in this picture, in terms of children's behavior and the vulnerability that they have?
Oh my gosh, could I? Yeah. Well, so I guess there's spanking, and spanking for a lot of people and a lot of parents do it out of religion. They do it because they think they're supposed to do it. They don't even want to, they don't like it, but they're doing it because they think that that's the way they're supposed to raise their kids. Various religious texts say, you know, honor thy mother and thy father, and, you know, if we don't, what? We're supposed to kill them, right? They're supposed to kill the kids if they don't honor the mother and the father. That's what the Bible says, I think, and other things. But it's that dogmatic thinking. It is the essence of control and power. And that is the concept that is so dangerous with relationships, with bringing up kids, and with religion. With religion, there's so much control and power. And it's with guilt, it's with fear. I was afraid of hell, I was afraid of demons. I felt guilty every single time I did something tiny wrong. And it made me very anxious, and it made me very afraid. And it really held me back. And the same thing happens to kids everywhere. If they're afraid, I had kids telling my son he was going to go to hell because he didn't believe. Kids have a limited way to understand things. And so if adults tell them gay people are bad, that's what they're going to believe. They say gay people are bad because God says this, that's what they're going to believe. If they say, well, women should be the helpmeet and they should stay home and, not do manly things, that's what the kids are going to believe. I don't know if that kind of answers your question or fully.
Well, there is an answer, but it seems very apropos. Not really having the ability to use the scientific method to determine whether or not what they're being told is true. They're kind of stuck there.
Yes.
That leads us to a lot of trouble.
Well, like I said before, bringing up a kid who thinks critically can be very challenging because they're going to ask questions. They're going to ask you questions. And if you have in your mindset, oh, I have to control my child, I have to overpower my child, if they ask you questions that you feel challenge you, you're going to feel like you need to come down on them, which will inhibit their ability to grow and to ask questions. And I think that's what bad religion does, is it makes us stay in our little spot, not ask questions, and it just gets passed down generation to generation. Parents raise children to be that way and just keeps going and going.
A question from Barb up here.
Well, I just have something to share, and maybe you guys have gotten this post as well. I'm not sure who it came from. But I just read something recently about Finland trying to pass a law making it illegal to indoctrinate kids into religion. And there's, of course, a big kerfuffle, and the churches are not into it. And but I thought this is a really major step for the world to I mean, if they can pull this off, what a wonderful thing. The whole
rest of the world is still indoctrinated, but at least.
Yeah, but baby steps.
Parents are going to do it if it's illegal or not.
Well, I mean, parents do things now in the States that are illegal because they think that they have the right to do it with their kids. So it's very challenging, like raising kids who are not indoctrinated, and raising kids who ask questions. I feel like a lot of humanists are like, yeah, let's do that. But then they get the kids that are asking questions and they're like, ugh, because they're asking questions. And sometimes the questions that they're asking you are uncomfortable or inconvenient, or sometimes they ask you a question that you want to lie to them about because of your own bias or your own way of having done things. I'll give an example, and I don't know if, hold on a second, let me ask a question down low. Just ensuring I'm not going to ruin anybody's holiday. So, I do not teach my kids to play examples or use money or any of that stuff. I frame it all as a story, and it's all enjoyable. We watch the cartoons, and we do Easter egg hunts, and old, fat dude does not actually come into our house, which if you think about it, it's terrifying. I have a friend who was trying to teach her 4-year-old about Santa Claus. He had an anxiety attack because he was like, Mommy, is he going to come in our house? Is Santa going to come in our house? What is he going to do? I mean, so but some parents, would feel uncomfortable about that if their parents asked them, or if their kids asked them, is Santa real? No, but do we want to tell them that? Of course I have to tell my kids, don't ruin other people's things, and let's not, because that can be sensitive, but I don't tell that to my kids because I don't want to set up the lie, and then they found out that I lied to them. And then they have to be like, well, what else? What other yarns have you been spinning? And that's just me personally. I don't try to take a moral stance on that, but it's hard once you kind of, you've raised them to ask questions, not that question, or ask me that question, but I might not tell you the truth about it. It's just hard sometimes raising critical thinkers because they ask questions.
I have to ask about shame, and it's relative to the fact that I was a wrestler and a coach, and I shamed one kid mercilessly because he was being brutal, and it's in opposition to the sport, and I love the sport. What do you think about shame?
I think shame is something that children are going to feel, and that is natural for them to feel if they do something that is wrong. So like if a kid is hurting another kid, it's okay to be like, you're hurting them, and of course they would probably feel shame about that if they don't want to hurt the kid. And then that would then hopefully they would be like, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel this feeling again. It has to be, you have to kind of look at it morally. Like, what are we shaming our kids on? Are we shaming them on sex? Is sex a moral wrong? We can't shame our kids about sex. But if somebody is hurting another person, well then, yes, we all know it's bad to hurt somebody. So yes, that is appropriate to be like, you shouldn't do that. You're really hurting them. So I mean, in that instance, would I say that it's appropriate? Yes. But I don't think that I think shame can be apt if there's a moral wrong. We just have to be pretty sure about that moral wrong and what's moral.
It extends to fans. There's a move that the Lehigh wrestling team, and it spread throughout the Lehigh Valley High School, that verges on tearing somebody's shoulder out of the joint. It's legal, and if used the right way, it doesn't tear the shoulder out of the joint. These guys were actually doing it, and it's very subtle. And Lehigh fans just ate it up, and I shame that publicly.
I think that's appropriate.
We got a question from Richard over here, and then I'll have one of my own.
Well, I have a little story. In the final weeks of my mother's life, when she was dying at the age of 95, she apologized for one thing. My mother and father were both devout Catholics. They realized that when they told me that there was no Santa Claus, I immediately concluded there was no Jesus either. And they thought that was the bitchity. And they did not do that with my siblings. We're also atheists, but in a practical sort of way.
So Shannon, you asked us to draw a picture of something we were afraid of, and I didn't draw Count Chocula in my attic because I don't know if I can draw Count Chocula, but I drew a syringe because I had tons and tons of anxiety over vaccinations and blood tests and things like that when I was a child. And I was raised by my father, And I was his third child, but the first one that he did the heavy lifting on. My mom passed away when I was 6 years old. And it's like I had never been to a pediatrician. When I was sick, I went to the family doctor. You know, I probably didn't see a dentist until I was in the 3rd grade, these types of things. And I had so much anxiety, not knowing like, oh, when am I going to need an immunization booster or something like that? And I would purposely not talk to my father about this anxiety because I was afraid it would remind him that I was due for something. So now I don't have children. I don't expect to ever have children. But what are ways, you know, when I think about how much of my childhood was filled with those types of anxieties, and my parent didn't even know what it was, is it as simple as asking questions of what you're afraid of? Because I know in my case, I would have been afraid to be honest because, again, the situation I mentioned.
So you have to establish a culture of honesty with your kids. And that's the hard part. You can't just parent and then expect that they will magically tell you things. You have to nurture a culture of honesty. So you have to be honest with them. And it helps. Talking about your feelings helps. Being vulnerable with your kids helps. Telling them about things you're afraid of. A lot of times if you talk to somebody about your own feelings, they will, especially if they feel very compelled to or they have a very strong feeling, they will reciprocate. So if you feel like a child or your child is afraid or anxious or whatever, you can talk to them about a time that you felt like that. And you can guess. I mean, I've had to guess before at things that my kids were afraid of or concerned about. And sometimes they open up. And sometimes they're not ready yet, and they do later. But yeah, you have to kind of, like, you have to think about, like, why were you were afraid because you didn't want him to remember to go and get that stuff. But so that makes sense. But I feel like if I take the kids in and they have to get those things, I'm not gonna say it because they're here and I don't want to freak out. But if I have to take them, I just tell them what's happening. I just explain it and I say, this is going to happen and it's going to be really short and it's okay if you get upset and it's okay if you feel afraid, and just talk about what's real and what's happening. And that will temper their expectations. Knowing what to expect is really big. Like, part of it, like, you had all that anxiety because you didn't know when it was going to happen. But if you just knew, if you were like, okay, this is going to happen, it's going to suck, but then it's going to happen, it's going to be done, I don't have to worry about it. Or if you said, you know, is this going to happen at this appointment? And they said no, you'd be like, phew, I don't have to worry about it at this appointment.
And had I had the reasoning capacity of an adult, I would have reminded my father so that I could get it over with and then not have the anxiety over it. But instead, I lived with the anxiety for years and years. And then when it was finally time, you know, at some point in the high school years, and had to go to the doctor, and I realized I was only like one shot behind on something, and I got it. And I'm like, I could have saved myself a lot of trouble.
I think a lot of fear for kids is not even in the actual events, not in the things that are going to happen. It's the anticipation and not knowing what's going to happen. At least I know with, like, my kids, schedule, knowing what to expect, knowing what's going to happen, that really helps in keeping their behavior kind of on the level. If they don't know what's going on, then they get really anxious. My 15-year-old, he'll still, like, ask me questions about what's going on, and I know that telling him will make him feel more secure and more calm. And I think most people are like that in general, but people forget that kids also have these feelings. They forget to tell the kids what's going on. It's like, you got to just tell them what's going on.
Any last questions? Yeah, Gary.
Sometimes I feel like I wish kids could say to parents, a failure to plan on your part doesn't create an emergency on mine, where a lot of parents transfer to the kids the anxiety or oops, and then it becomes the kid's fault. You're not getting ready fast enough. I always had a half hour. Well, today it's 10 minutes because the parent didn't plan. And I guess I don't know how to say that to adults sometimes, or explain it to kids, like, That's an awkward conversation of life planning.
So I've done that before. Like, I have caused my teen to miss an appointment before because I wasn't ready. And I felt really bad about it. And he was also kind of lollygagging, but really it was my fault, and I knew it. And I was just like, this is my fault. I should have planned better. I didn't plan better, but I'm going to plan better next time, and I'm going to do better. And I did. But it's like, in the moment, it is sucky. Yeah, because, I mean, you know, because you want to set a good example for your kids. But again, parents are not perfect. And when you make mistakes, you just have to own them. And if they see you owning your own mistakes, they will, or they're more likely to own their own.
All right, then I think, seeing no more hands, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you so much, Shanon, for coming.
Oh, one more thing.
Oh, sure.
Just really, really quick. And this is not related to my talk. So September 20th through the 22nd, in North Carolina, Recovering from Religion is going to be doing a fall excursion. And this is going to be kind of an intensive kind of environment for people who are still recovering from shame, from guilt, from different beliefs, fear of hell. And I have some postcards on it on the table over there. If anybody is interested or thinks somebody else might be interested, please take a postcard and look it up.
And we'll put a link in our newsletter as well. So, great. And speaking of upcoming events, like I said, lvhumanist.org, you'll find all our list of upcoming events as normal, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for coming out.